Kaid's agonized scream echoed through the desolate canyon as the warlord's electro-whip seared his flesh, the young Pakled knowing he would suffer endlessly, unless these relentless humans somehow managed to protect him from the horrors of his own cruel species. Only cycles ago, Kaid had been piloting a small scout vessel, surveying this barren world for potential resources. But a sudden ion storm caught him by surprise, frying his systems and sending him spiraling into the rocky surface below. The impact shattered his leg and left him barely clinging to life as he dragged himself from the smoking wreckage. Before he could even activate the distress beacon, a menacing warship appeared on the horizon. Scavengers, the ruthless clan of Pakled outcasts who preyed on the weak and vulnerable. Led by a vicious warlord, they descended upon Kaid like jackals, intent on capturing him as a slave or priceless bounty. Kaid barely managed to evade their grasping claws, limping away into the hostile wilderness with little food, water, or hope. Light years away, Captain Craig Scott of the UES Dauntless was leading a routine survey mission of the sector when the long-range scanners picked up Kaid's faint distress signal. The alien signature was like nothing in the human databases, an unknown entity. Protocol dictated they proceed with caution when dealing with new life forms. But something in that alien's strangled cry for help stirred an instinct deep within the human crew. A primal drive to protect the innocent and shield the vulnerable, even at great risk to themselves. Without hesitation, Scott plotted an intercept course, rallying a landing party of his most trusted officers, Mike Thompson, Jack Ryder, and Dave Nguyen. On the planet's dusty surface, they tracked Kaid's fading life signs to a shallow cave. The wounded Pakled cowered in the shadows, trembling, his compound eyes wide with fear and confusion. He had never encountered beings like these humans before, with their strange bipedal forms and soft, expressive faces. But there was no time for introductions or explanations. The bloodthirsty scavengers were closing in, hungry for their prize. Pulse blasters met plasma rifles as humans and Pakled clashed under the baleful light of a dying sun. The small human team fought with a skill and ferocity that belied their numbers, driving the marauders back into their ships. For the first time, Kaid felt the unfamiliar spark of hope as the humans gently carried him to the safety of their gleaming vessel. Maybe he would survive this nightmare after all. Maybe he had found beings who would show him compassion and decency, so alien to the brutal Pakled way. But his relief was short-lived. The scavenger warlord was not so easily deterred, and his need for vengeance burned hotter than a dozen stars. Mustering his entire armada, he set out in furious pursuit of the human ship, hungry for blood and retribution. Now, the Dauntless flees across the void, its valiant crew battered but unbroken, their alien ward watching in awe as these remarkable humans risk everything to keep him safe. But the warlord's warships are faster and stronger, and it's only a matter of time before they run the humans to ground. As the protective embrace of sickbay gives way to the claustrophobic confines of a damaged ship, with hostile aliens howling for their blood outside, Kaid and his human guardians face a final stand on a remote moon. Outnumbered and outgunned, with nowhere left to run, they must fight with every ounce of courage and ingenuity they possess. For Kaid, it's a chance to redeem himself, to prove that one Pakled at least can rise above the savagery of his kind. For the humans, it's a testament to the unyielding strength of the human spirit, the lengths they will go to uphold their principles, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Two disparate cultures, brought together by circumstance and forged in the crucible of combat, now stand as one against the forces of cruelty and oppression. The future of human-Pakled relations hangs in the balance, along with the lives of Kaid and his human companions. On this tiny, insignificant moon, the humans must hold the line against the scavenger horde. They must fight for what's right, no matter the cost. They must show the galaxy the true measure of human resolve, of what it means to be human. And Kaid must learn to believe in that resolve, the strength his human friends see within him, waiting to be unleashed. The battle is about to begin, a desperate struggle against all odds, and the stakes could not be higher. Kaid and the crew of the Dauntless will give all they have, down to their last breath, For in this moment, this shining instant of defiance and bravery, they are the best of their two species. It's time to see what humans are really made of. It's time to show why every alien in the cosmos whispers about this tenacious, unbreakable race from Sol 3. It's time for the warlord and his scavengers to learn why you never, ever back humans into a corner. Because when the caissons rattle and the pulse rifles hiss, when human fury burns bright in defense of the innocent, there's only one rallying cry that matters. Humanity, fuck yeah! The distant rumble of engines signaled the scavengers' approach. Captain Craig Scott surveyed the barren landscape around their crashed ship, his mind racing. All right, people, we've got maybe an hour before they're on us. Let's make it count. Craig's crew sprang into action, hauling debris and equipment to form a makeshift barricade. Keed, despite his injured leg, worked tirelessly alongside them. The Paklid's compound eyes darted between components as his six-fingered hands deftly wired together salvaged tech. Holy shit, Mike whispered, watching Kai jury-rig a force field generator from the ship's damaged shield emitters. The little guy's got skills. Jack grunted as he hefted a fallen bulkhead into place. Yeah, well, let's hope it's enough. We're seriously outgunned here. The scavengers' war cry echoed across the desolate plain as their ships touched down. Hundreds of Paklid warriors poured out, brandishing cruel weapons. Craig gripped his pulse rifle tighter. Hold the line. The first wave crashed against their defenses like a tsunami. Keed's makeshift force field sputtered and sparked under the onslaught, but held. Craig and his team unleashed a hail of pulse fire, cutting down scores of attackers. But for every scavenger that fell, two more took their place, the air filled with plasma bolts and the screams of the wounded. Dave caught a glancing hit to his shoulder, crying out in pain but refusing to leave his post. In the chaos, Craig spotted a scavenger sneaking around their flank, zeroing in on Keed. Without thinking, the captain vaulted over the barricade. He slammed into the attacker just as the Pakled raised his weapon, both of them tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs. They grappled furiously, Craig's human strength matched against the Paklid's multiple arms. A vicious headbutt stunned the scavenger long enough for Craig to wrench the weapon away and knock him unconscious. Keed stared at Craig in awe. You saved me! Craig clasped the Paklid's shoulder. That's what friends do. As the battle raged on, their situation grew dire. Ammunition ran low, and Kaid's force field finally gave out with a shower of sparks. Scavengers breached the perimeter, pouring through gaps in their defenses. This is it, Craig thought grimly, preparing for a last stand. But then Keed's eyes widened in recognition. Marlowe, Keed called out, his voice cutting through the din of battle. Brother, is that you? A burly Paklid turned, his scarred face a mask of shock. Keed! What are you doing with these humans? Keed limped forward, arms spread wide. They saved me, brother. These humans risked everything to protect me from our own kind. Please stop this senseless violence. The humans watched tensely as Marlowe's gaze darted between Keed and the battered defenders. After a long moment, he raised his hand. Stand down! All of you, stand down now! A hush fell over the battlefield. The clan's warlord stormed forward, face contorted in rage. What is the meaning of this, Marlowe? Kill them all! No, Marlowe's voice was steel. This ends now. What followed was a blur of motion as the two Pakleds clashed. Fists and claws flew in a brutal display of strength. But Marlowe fought with purpose, fueled by his brother's words. With a final devastating blow, he laid the warlord out cold. Marlowe turned to face the stunned onlookers. I claim leadership of the clan by right of combat, and I say we will have peace with these humans. Craig stepped forward cautiously. I'm Captain Craig Scott of the UES Dauntless. We appreciate your change of heart. What now? Marlowe's eyes narrowed. You will leave our territory once your ship is repaired. In exchange, we will assist in those repairs. As the uneasy truce took hold, humans and Pakleds began the arduous task of fixing the Dauntless. Craig watched the strange sight of former enemies working side by side, Keed eagerly bridging the gap between the two groups. Hell of a day, Mike muttered, coming to stand beside his captain. Craig nodded, lost in thought. They'd saved Keed, survived impossible odds, and maybe even planted the seeds of understanding between their peoples. But as he watched Marlowe's wary gaze, Craig couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The barren moon buzzed with activity as humans and Pakleds worked side by side to repair the battered Dauntless. Captain Craig Scott wiped sweat from his brow, hefting a damaged power coupling onto his shoulder. He watched Kaid expertly splice wires, the Pakled's multiple arms a flurry of motion. "You're pretty handy with tech," Craig said, setting down the coupling. Keed's compound eyes swiveled towards him. "Necessity breeds innovation, Captain. When you grow up scavenging, you learn to make do." As they worked, Craig peppered Keed with questions about Pakled culture. Keed, in turn, marveled at human customs. "You mean you only have 2 parents? How do you manage with so few limbs?" Days passed. The ship slowly came back to life. During a break, Craig found Keed staring at the stars, mandibles clicking nervously. "Something on your mind?" Craig asked. Keed's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's more to my story, Captain. The real reason I fled." The Pakled's tale unfolded. A web of corruption, secret deals with a malevolent race called the Zorgans. Keed had uncovered proof, barely escaping with his life. Craig's fists clenched. "We'll expose this, Keed, I promise." He strode to the communications array, hailing Earth Alliance Command. "This is Captain Scott. Priority 1 transmission. We need a diplomatic envoy." Before Craig could finish coordinating the rendezvous, alarms blared. A massive Pakled warship dropped out of warp, weapons trained on the Dauntless. "Attention, human vessel," a gruff voice boomed. "This is Captain Grax of the Pakled Defense Force. Surrender the fugitive Keed and all data in his possession immediately." Marlowe rushed over, face twisted in conflict. "Brother, what have you done?" Craig stepped between them. "Stand down, Marlowe. There's more going on here than you know." "You don't understand," Marlowe hissed. "If we defy them, they'll destroy us all." The human crew scrambled to battle stations. Craig's voice rang out, calm and clear. "This is Captain Scott. We will not comply with your demands." "Then you leave us no choice," Grax snarled. "Prepare to be boarded. Resist, and we'll blow you out of the sky." Craig allowed himself a small smile. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Grax. The evidence Keed stole, it's already been transmitted to Earth Alliance Command. Destroy us, and you'll only confirm your guilt." Silence stretched across the comm channel. Finally, Grax's voice returned, subdued. "Stand down weapons. We're withdrawing." As the Pakled warship retreated, Marlowe approached Craig and Kaid. "I've been a fool," he said. "Whatever you've uncovered, brother, I'm with you. Let's make this right." Craig nodded grimly. "It won't be easy. We're up against powerful forces, both Pakled and Zorgon, but together we might have a chance." He turned to his crew. "All right, people, change of plans. We're heading into Pakled space. We've got a conspiracy to expose and a war to prevent." The Dauntless hummed to life, rising from the moon's surface. As they set course for Pakled territory, Craig couldn't shake a feeling of foreboding. This was only the beginning of a dangerous game, one with the fate of entire civilizations hanging in the balance. The Dauntless dropped out of warp near the outskirts of Pakled space, its hull still bearing scars from their recent battle. Craig stood on the bridge, watching the unfamiliar stars drift by on the monitor. "All right, folks, we're in the deep end now," he said, turning to face his crew and their Pakled allies. "Keed, what can we expect on your homeworld?" Keed's compound eyes shifted nervously. "Security will be tight, especially around government facilities. We'll need to blend in." Over the next few hours, they put their plan into action. The Dauntless's hull was reconfigured to resemble a common Pakled freighter. Craig and his human crew donned bulky environmental suits, their features hidden beneath reflective faceplates. As they approached the planet, a gruff voice crackled over the comms. "Unidentified vessel, state your business." Marlowe stepped forward, his voice steady. Cargo delivery for central distribution. Transmitting clearance codes now. Tense seconds ticked by. Craig's hand hovered near the weapons console, ready for trouble. Finally, the voice returned. Codes verified. Proceed to docking bay 17. They touched down without incident. As the landing ramp lowered, Craig turned to his team. Remember, act natural. We're just another crew of merchants. They made their way through crowded streets, Cade leading them towards the outskirts of the capital. The Pakled homeworld was a chaotic jumble of scavenged technology, with towering structures cobbled together from mismatched parts. In a dingy alleyway, Cade rapped out a complex sequence on a rusted door. It slid open, revealing a wizened Pakled with cybernetic implants. "Jarok," Cade whispered, "we need your help." The old Pakled ushered them inside. "I knew you'd return someday, my student. But bringing outsiders? These are dangerous times." Craig stepped forward, removing his helmet. "I'm Captain Craig Scott of the Earth Alliance. We're here to stop the Zorgon threat." Jarok's cybernetic eye whirred as he studied Craig. "Bold words, human. But do you have the strength to back them up?" For the next hour, they laid out everything they knew about the government's dealings with the Zorgons. Jarok listened intently, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "This confirms our worst fears," he said finally. "We've been gathering evidence for months, but nothing as conclusive as what you've brought." He shuffled over to a hidden compartment, retrieving a data crystal. "This contains everything we've uncovered. Financial records, communication logs, weapons schematics. With this, we can expose the traitors in our midst." Just as Craig accepted the crystal, alarms blared throughout the hideout. Jarok's good eye widened in panic. "We've been compromised." The door exploded inward, revealing a towering Zorgon flanked by Pakled security forces. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Craig and his team dove for cover. "Get to the ship," Craig shouted, returning fire. "We can't lose that data." They fought their way through the streets, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Marlowe brought up the rear, laying down suppressing fire. "Go!" he yelled as they neared the spaceport. "I'll hold them off." Craig hesitated, but Cade grabbed his arm. "We have to go, Captain. My brother knows what he's doing." With a heavy heart, Craig sprinted up the Dauntless's ramp. As they lifted off, he caught a final glimpse of Marlowe, standing defiantly against a wave of attackers. Once they were safely in orbit, Craig allowed himself a moment to mourn. But there was no time for an extended grief. They had the evidence they needed, but exposing the conspiracy wouldn't be enough to stop the Zorgon invasion. "Set a course deeper into Pakled space," he ordered. "There are rumors of an ancient stronghold, something that might give us an edge against the Zorgons." As they traveled, a transmission came through from Earth Alliance Command. "Captain Scott, this is Admiral Chen. We're sending reinforcements your way, along with a diplomatic envoy." Craig's heart skipped a beat as a familiar face appeared on the screen. "Hello, Dad," said Amy Scott, her expression a mix of perseverance and unperseverance tension. "Looks like you could use a xenobiologist." With Amy's expertise and the fresh supplies, they pored over ancient Pakled texts and star charts. After days of frustrating dead ends, Amy made a breakthrough. "Here," she exclaimed, pointing to a seemingly barren moon. "The fortress isn't on the surface, it's underneath." They approached the desolate planetoid cautiously. As they neared the coordinates Amy had deciphered, the Dauntless shuddered, caught in some kind of tractor beam. "Unknown vessel," a deep voice boomed. "You trespass on sacred ground. Prepare to be judged." The ship was pulled into a vast underground hangar. As the dust settled, Craig and his team found themselves surrounded by powerfully built Pakleds in ornate armor. Cade stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "Noble warriors of old, we come seeking your aid. Our people face enslavement by the Zorgon Empire." The lead warrior regarded them silently for a long moment. "We have guarded the weapon of our ancestors for generations, waiting for those worthy to wield it. If you truly wish to save your people, you must prove yourselves." Craig met the warrior's gaze steadily. "Whatever trials you have for us, we're ready." The Pakled nodded gravely. Then let the tests begin. But be warned, humans and outworlder Pakleds. Many have tried. None have succeeded. As Craig and his team steeled themselves for the challenges ahead, the distant rumble of approaching ships echoed through the cavern. The Zorgon invasion fleet had arrived, and time was running out. The ancient Pakled fortress rumbled as Craig and his team emerged from the final trial chamber, their bodies battered but spirits unbroken. In Craig's hands gleamed a set of iridescent crystals, pulsing with barely contained energy. "We did it," he breathed, his voice ragged from exertion. Before anyone could celebrate, alarms blared throughout the complex. The lead Pakled warrior's eyes widened in alarm. "Intruders! The sacred halls have been breached!" The cavern shook as explosions rocked the outer defenses. Through gaping holes in the rock, Craig glimpsed sleek Zorgon fighters screaming past. "How did they find us?" Amy shouted over the din. There was no time to ponder. Zorgon shock troopers poured into the chamber, their insectoid forms jam-packed with weaponry. Craig's team scrambled for cover as energy bolts sizzled past. "Keed," Craig called out, "we need that super weapon online now." The Pakled engineer darted towards the ancient control panel, dodging fire as he went. His multiple arms flew over the unfamiliar controls, desperately trying to interface the crystals. Craig and the others formed a protective ring around Keed, returning fire with their own weapons. The air filled with ozone and the screams of the wounded. A Zorgon mech stomped into view, its massive plasma cannon charging. "We can't hold them much longer," one of the Pakled warriors cried out. Just as the defenders were about to be overrun, Amy let out a triumphant yell. She'd managed to slot the final crystal into place. The entire chamber hummed with power. Kaid's fingers danced across the controls. A beam of pure energy lanced out from the weapon, cutting through the Zorgon forces like they were paper. Within seconds, the chamber was clear of enemies. Their reprieve was short-lived. The fortress shuddered under heavy bombardment from orbit. Craig's comm crackled to life with an incoming transmission from the Dauntless. "Captain," his first officer's voice was frantic. "A Zorgon dreadnought just dropped out of warp. They're tearing the moon apart." Craig's mind raced. They had the super weapon, but it wouldn't be enough against a capital ship. His gaze fell on Amy and Keed, both looking to him for guidance. "Keed, Amy, you stay here and man the weapon. Buy us as much time as you can," Craig ordered. He turned to the rest of his team. "We're going to hit that dreadnought where it hurts. Who's with me?" Without hesitation, his crew stepped forward. They sprinted for the Dauntless as the fortress crumbled around them. Craig's hands flew over the controls, plotting an intercept course with the Zorgon flagship. "Strap in," he warned as they rocketed towards the massive vessel. "This is going to get rough." The Dauntless weaved through a hail of plasma fire, its hull screaming in protest. They slammed into one of the dreadnought's hangar bays, the ship's force fields barely containing the explosive decompression. Craig led the charge out of the airlock, his team fanning out to secure the area. Zorgon soldiers swarmed towards them, filling the air with deadly energy bolts. "Push forward!" Craig shouted, leading the assault deeper into the ship. They fought their way through twisting corridors, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Finally, they reached the ship's reactor core. Craig pulled out a set of explosive charges, his hands steady as he began to set them. A stray bolt caught him in the side. Craig stumbled, nearly dropping the detonator. He knew what he had to do. "Get back to the ship," he ordered his team. "I'll finish this." His second-in-command started to protest, but Craig cut him off. "That's an order. Tell Amy. Tell her I'm sorry." As his team reluctantly retreated, Craig turned back to the reactor. He armed the charges, his vision blurring from the pain. With the last of his strength, he activated the detonator. The explosion ripped through the dreadnought just as a massive energy beam from the moon's surface tore into its hull. The Zorgon flagship cracked apart like an egg, spewing debris across space. On the moon's surface, Amy watched in horror as the dreadnought disintegrated. Her father's ship was nowhere to be seen. "Dad?" she whispered into the comm. Static was her only answer. As the reality of their victory and its cost sank in, Amy felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Keed, his compound eyes filled with sorrow. "Your father was a hero," the Pakled said softly. "His sacrifice will not be forgotten." Amy nodded, choking back tears. She knew there would be time to mourn later. For now, they had a rebellion to lead. In the days that followed, Amy took command of the human contingent. She worked tirelessly with Keed and the Pakled resistance, using the stolen data to expose the corruption within their government. As news of the conspiracy spread, Pakled society fractured. Those loyal to the old regime clashed with those demanding change. Amy's crew found themselves providing tactical support and supplies to Keed's faction, all while mourning their fallen captain. Despite their victory over the Zorgon strike force, the threat was just the beginning. Reports trickled in of a massive Zorgon armada assembling at the edge of Pakled space. Amy stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, staring out at the stars. Her father's absence greatly troubled on her, but she drew strength from his memory. "What's our next move?" Cade asked, joining her at the viewport. Amy's eyes hardened with persistence. "We finish what my father started. We stand with your people and we face the Zorgons head-on." As they plotted their strategy, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come. The Zorgons were coming, and this time, they would show no mercy. Mercy. Amy Scott stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, her father's absence weighing heavily on her. She clenched her fists, pushing aside her grief. There was work to be done. "All hands, this is Acting Captain Scott," she announced over the ship's comm. "We've suffered a great loss, but our mission isn't over. The Pakled people need us now more than ever." She turned to Keed, who nodded solemnly. "What's our next move?" "We strike hard and fast," Keed replied, his multiple arms gesturing at a holographic map. "My contacts in the Resistance have identified key Zorgon supply depots. We hit them, disrupt their operations, and rally more Pakleds to our cause." Over the next weeks, the Dauntless became a ghost, materializing to wreak havoc on Zorgon targets before vanishing into the void. Amy led boarding parties, her pulse rifles spitting plasma as they sabotaged fuel reserves and liberated enslaved Pakleds. During one raid, Amy's team found themselves pinned down in a Zorgon hangar. Energy bolts sizzled past, scorching the deck plates. "We're cut off!" shouted her second-in-command. Amy's eyes darted around the hangar, landing on a sleek Zorgon fighter. "Not yet, we're not. Cover me." She sprinted across the open floor, diving into the fighter's cockpit. Her fingers flew over the alien controls, muscle memory from countless simulations kicking in. The engines roared to life as she lifted off, strafing the Zorgon forces with devastating accuracy. "All units, fall back to the Dauntless," Amy ordered, providing cover fire as her team retreated. As they jumped to warp, leaving the smoldering Zorgon base behind, Amy allowed herself a small smile. "Send word to Keed. We've got ourselves a new toy." The captured Zorgon fighter proved invaluable in subsequent hit-and-run attacks, but even as the rebellion gained momentum, reports of a massive Zorgon armada assembling at the edge of Pakled space sent a chill through the Resistance. In a secure bunker deep beneath the Pakled homeworld, Amy and Kaid pored over intercepted Zorgon transmissions. "It's worse than we feared," Kaid said, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the data. "They mean to strip our worlds bare, enslave our entire species." Amy's teeth gritted. "Then we need a game changer. What about those ancient defenses you mentioned?" Keed hesitated. "It's a long shot. The wormhole network hasn't been used in generations. Activating it could tear the fabric of space-time itself. And if we do nothing, the Pakleds cease to exist as a free people," Amy countered. "We have to try." Days later, the Dauntless hovered near an unremarkable asteroid. Kaid's fingers danced over a hidden control panel, inputting a complex series of commands. The space before them shimmered, a swirling vortex of energy coalescing into existence. "It worked!" Keed exclaimed. Amy gripped the arms of the captain's chair. "Helm, take us in. Let's see where this rabbit hole leads." The Dauntless plunged into the wormhole, reality twisting around them. When they emerged on the other side, gasps of awe filled the bridge. A vast armada of Pakled ships unlike anything they'd ever seen filled the view screen. Sleek, powerful vessels that put their own technology to shame. Unidentified vessel. A stern voice crackled over the comm. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves or be destroyed. Amy exchanged a glance with Cade before opening a channel. This is Acting Captain Amy Scott of the Earth Alliance vessel Dauntless. We come seeking aid on behalf of the Pakled resistance in our universe. A tense silence followed. Then, did you say, your universe? Hours later, Amy stood before the Allied Pakled Council, recounting the horrors inflicted by the Zorgons. The counselors listened with growing outrage. This cannot stand, declared the lead counselor, rising to his feet. We will not abandon our brothers and sisters in your reality to such a fate. The full might of the Allied Pakled fleet stands ready to assist you. As preparations for the counterattack began, Amy retreated to her quarters. She pulled out a worn photograph of her father, tracing his face with her finger. We're going to finish what you started, Dad, she whispered. I promise. Amy Scott stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The combined fleet of Allied Pakled and human ships surged forward, their weapons blazing against the Zorgon defenses. All ships, push through their outer perimeter, Amy ordered. We can't let those traitors escape. The space around the massive Zorgon shipyard lit up with explosions as the rebel fleet tore into the enemy formation. Amy felt the deck shudder beneath her feet as the Dauntless took a glancing hit. Shields holding at 80%, her tactical officer reported. We're punching through. Amy nodded. Her eyes hardened. Prepare boarding teams. We're going after their command ship. Minutes later, Amy led the assault force through the airlock, Cade at her side. They moved swiftly down the corridors of the Pakled flagship, encountering immediate resistance. A swarm of Zorgon drones buzzed towards them, energy weapons glowing. Amy ducked behind a bulkhead, firing her pulse rifle in controlled bursts. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as energy bolts flew in both directions. Push forward, Amy shouted, vaulting over a fallen drone. Her team advanced, methodically clearing each section of the ship. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of Pakled loyalists. One of them, his eyes wild with fanaticism, charged at Amy with a vibro blade. Cade reacted instantly, his cybernetic arms a blur as he grappled with the attacker. Go! He yelled to Amy. I'll handle these traitors. Amy hesitated for a split second before nodding and pressing on with the rest of her team. They fought their way through several more decks, the ship's internal alarms blaring. Suddenly, the entire vessel shuddered violently. Amy's comm crackled to life. Captain, the Zorgons have initiated the shipyard's self-destruct sequence. We're reading massive power fluctuations. Amy's blood ran cold. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. She turned to her team. Double time, people. We need to reach that command center now. They redoubled their efforts, fighting with renewed urgency. Finally, they reached the heavily fortified doors of the ship's nerve center. Breaching charges! Amy called out. Her demolitions expert rushed forward, planting the explosives. The doors blew inward with a thunderous boom. Through the smoke, Amy saw the shocked faces of the Pakled officials and their Zorgon handlers. Cade limped into the room behind them, his right arm sparking from damage. He locked eyes with the lead Pakled, his voice dripping with contempt. You sold out our people. You don't deserve to call yourselves Pakled. One of the officials made a move for a weapon. Amy's rifle snapped up, the laser sight steady on his forehead. Don't even think about it, she warned. A violent tremor rocked the ship. Amy's comm chirped again. Captain, reactor's going critical. You need to evacuate now. Amy grabbed the nearest official, shoving him towards the exit. Move, unless you want to die with your Zorgon masters. They herded the captives through the corridors, racing against time. Amy's fingers flew over her wrist computer, inputting the coordinates for an emergency wormhole. Just as they reached the airlock, Cade stumbled. Amy turned to see a growing stain of purple blood on his side. "Cade!" she cried out, moving to support him. "Leave me!" he gasped. "Get them out of here!" Amy shook her head fiercely. Not a chance. She half-carried, half-dragged him into the airlock as the wormhole flickered to life. They tumbled through the swirling vortex of energy just as a massive explosion tore through the shipyard behind them. Amy's last glimpse was of the Zorgon facility disappearing in a ball of fire. They emerged on the other side, aboard the Allied Pakled medical frigate. Medics rushed forward, whisking Cade away on a gurney. Amy watched them go, her heart heavy. A Pakled scientist approached her, his expression grave. "Captain Scott, we may have a way to save Cade, but it's risky." Amy listened as he explained the proposed neural transfer. Her mind reeled at the implications, but she knew there was no other choice. "Do it," she ordered. As the medical team prepped Cade for the procedure, a priority message came through. Amy's eyes widened as she read it. "Survivors found in the debris field," she whispered, "including my father." Amy rushed to the med bay, her heart pounding. There, lying on a bed, was the battered but very much alive form of Captain Craig Scott. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on Amy's face. "Hey, kiddo," he said weakly. "Miss me?" Amy fought back tears, grasping his hand. "Welcome back, Dad." She wanted to tell him everything, about Cade, about the neural transfer, but held back. Her father needed rest, and Cade's fate still hung in the balance. In the adjacent operating theater, the Allied Pakled scientists began the delicate process of transferring Cade's consciousness. Amy watched through the observation window, her stomach churning with anxiety. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Cade's neural patterns flowed into the new cybernetic body, but then alarms began to blare. "We're losing him," one of the scientists shouted. "Cascade failure in the memory banks." Amy pressed her hands against the glass, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come on, Cade, fight." Amy's fingers flew across the control panel, her eyes darting between flickering readouts. Cade's neural patterns destabilized further, critical systems flashing red. "We're losing him," a Pakled scientist shouted. Amy shook her head, teeth gritted. "Not on my watch." She turned to the lead engineer. "Reroute power from life support to the primary matrix. We need every ounce of processing power." The engineer's eyes widened. "But that could—" "Do it," Amy snapped. As the air grew thin, Amy's mind raced. There had to be a way. Her eyes fell on a neural interface headset. "Get me hooked up to Cade's system," she ordered, snatching the device. The medical officer stepped forward. "Captain, the risks—" Amy cut him off. "I don't care, it's our only shot." She jammed the headset on, wincing as neural probes pierced her skin. A jolt of electricity surged through her body as the connection initialized. Amy's consciousness plunged into a maelstrom of data. Fragments of Cade's memories whirled past, glimpses of his homeworld, the horror of Zorgon invasion. She pushed deeper, searching for Cade's core essence. There, a faint pulse of familiar thought patterns. Amy latched onto it, pouring her own mental energy into shoring up the failing engrams. Cade's voice echoed in her mind, weak but present. "Amy, what's happening?" "Hold on, Cade," she projected. "I've got you." Their thoughts intertwined, Amy's human perspective meshing with Cade's alien outlook. She felt his deep-seated grief over the plight of his people, his burning desire for justice. In turn, Cade experienced Amy's memories, the weight of command, her anguish over her father's apparent death. "Your father," Cade's thoughts resonated. "He saved me, showed me humans could be allies." Amy saw the moment through Cade's eyes, her father extending a hand to a young, frightened, Pakled refugee. Their shared consciousness stabilized, Amy's human neural patterns filling the gaps in Cade's failing matrix. Warning klaxons faded as system after system returned to normal. Amy opened her eyes, gasping. The Pakled scientists stared in awe. "It worked," one whispered. "The matrix is stable." Amy stood on shaky legs, her mind still reeling from the profound connection. She locked eyes with Kaid's new biomechanical body. "We're not done yet," Amy said, her voice steel. "We know where the Zorgons are hiding. It's time to end this." Hours later, Amy crouched in the cramped confines of an infiltration pod, fingers dancing over the stealth drive controls. Kaid's hulking form filled the space beside her, a cortical uplink cable snaking from his head to the ship's systems. "Allied fleet standing by," Kaid reported, his synthesized voice tinged with anticipation. Amy nodded, engaging the drive. The pod's exterior shimmered, becoming nearly invisible. They punched through the Zorgon Nexus's outer defenses undetected, the massive station looming before them. Amy guided the pod to a maintenance airlock, overriding security protocols with ease. Once inside, they moved swiftly through shadowy corridors. Amy's pulse rifle swept each intersection as Kaid's enhanced senses probed for threats. They reached a central computer hub. Kaid interfaced directly with the system, cyber warfare programs unspooling from his consciousness. "Initiating network disruption," he reported. Alarms blared as systems across the station went haywire. Amy grinned fiercely. "Let's keep moving. We need to find those warlords." They fought their way deeper into the Nexus, Amy's rifle spitting plasma while Kaid's mechanical limbs crushed any resistance. Through their neural link, Amy felt Kaid's savage joy at striking back against his people's oppressors. Finally, they reached a heavily fortified bunker. Amy placed breaching charges as Kaid hacked the door controls. The explosion rocked the station. Through the smoke, Amy saw the shocked faces of Zorgon leaders and their pack-led collaborators. "It's over," Amy declared, her rifle trained on the group. "Surrender now." A Zorgon warlord snarled, reaching for a weapon. Amy felt Kaid's rage surge through their link. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But another feeling washed over her. Justice, not vengeance. She saw her father's face, remembered his compassion. "Don't," Amy said aloud, as much to Kaid as to the Zorgon. "We're better than them." The warlord's hand fell away from his weapon. One by one, the enemy leaders dropped to their knees. Outside, the Allied fleet descended on the crippled station. The war that had consumed so much of Amy's life was finally, truly over. As the adrenaline faded, Amy became acutely aware of Kaid's presence in her mind. Their thoughts and emotions flowed freely between them, an intimacy beyond anything she'd ever known. "I don't think I can go back," Kaid's thoughts whispered, "to being separate." Amy nodded, understanding completely. "We'll find a way forward, together." As they watched Allied ships secure the station, Amy and Kaid's merged consciousness pondered the vast, unknown future stretching out before them. The star-speckled void stretched endlessly before them, as Amy and Kaid's merged consciousness piloted the radiant Voyager through uncharted space. Their shared thoughts flowed seamlessly, guiding the ship's systems with unprecedented precision. "Anomalous energy signatures detected," they communicated internally. "Dark matter nebula ahead." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a swirling mass of cosmic darkness. Tendrils of exotic matter writhed at its edges, defying conventional physics. "All hands prepare for nebula entry," Amy's voice rang out over the ship's comms. The crew bustled about, securing stations and running final system checks. As they penetrated the nebula's outer boundary, reality itself seemed to warp. Sensor readings spiked erratically, overloading several auxiliary systems. "Compensating," Kaid's synthesized voice intoned. Their shared neural network rerouted power, stabilizing the ship's functions. Suddenly, the nebula parted, revealing a graveyard of titanic proportions. Massive derelict vessels drifted silently, their hulls scarred by weapons beyond human comprehension. "By the spirits," a Packlet officer whispered, awe and terror mingling in his voice. Amy Kaid's merged consciousness probed deeper, detecting faint echoes reverberating through subspace. Ghostly impressions of long-dead minds brushed against their own. "We're picking up some kind of pattern," they announced, a trail leading further in. Following the cosmic breadcrumbs, they navigated through frozen plasma storms and fields of twisted debris. The radiant Voyager emerged into a vast clearing, and the crew collectively gasped. Before them loomed a colossal space station, its geometry defying Euclidean logic. Surfaces twisted in impossible angles, disappearing into higher dimensions only to reappear elsewhere. "Initiate deep scans," Amy Keed ordered. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." As the Voyager's sensors probed the alien construct, the station pulsed with newfound energy. Swarms of crystalline objects detached from its surface, rapidly approaching the ship. "Defensive systems online," Keed's voice boomed. "Brace for impact." The antimatter drones slammed into the Voyager's shields, each impact releasing devastating energy. Alarms blared as systems overloaded. "Shields failing," an officer shouted. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. Amy Keed's merged consciousness worked furiously, trying to counter the onslaught. "All hands, abandon ship, get to the escape pods." As the crew scrambled to evacuate, Amy and Keed made a split-second decision. They diverted all remaining power to the experimental wormhole drive. "May the spirits guide you home," they transmitted to the fleeing escape pods. With a blinding flash, the radiant Voyager vanished, leaving its crew behind. Reality twisted and buckled around them as the ship hurtled through dimensional barriers. When the chaotic journey finally ended, they found themselves in an unfamiliar star system. "Damage report," Amy's voice echoed through empty corridors. Their shared consciousness spread through the ship's systems, assessing the situation. "Quantum slipstream drive critically damaged," Keed reported. "We're stranded." They guided the crippled vessel to a nearby planet, its surface a bleak expanse of rock and dust. As the radiant Voyager settled onto the alien world, Amy and Keed faced the gravity of their situation. "We have to find help," Amy's thoughts resonated through their shared mind. Keed's agreement mingled with her own. "We'll search for signs of civilization. There must be someone in this universe who can aid us." Their merged consciousness poured into the ship's remaining functional systems, preparing for the daunting task ahead. Together, they stepped into the unknown, driven by an unshakable perseverance to find their way home. The radiant Voyager's hull creaked and groaned as Amy and Keed's merged consciousness guided the crippled vessel to a landing on the desolate alien world. Acrid smoke billowed from ruptured conduits as they shambled out of the ship, their biomechanical form already showing signs of strain. Harsh winds whipped across a barren landscape of jagged rock formations and swirling dust. Amy's thoughts intertwined with Keed's as they surveyed their surroundings. "Life support systems failing," Keed's synthetic voice intoned. "We must find shelter." They trudged across the rocky terrain, servos whining with each step. Amy felt their shared cognitive functions deteriorating, once complex algorithms reduced to basic survival imperatives. In the shadow of a towering cliff face, they spotted a cluster of crystalline growths pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Amy's scientific curiosity flickered briefly. "Silicon-based life forms," she mused. "Perhaps we can interface." Their hand reached out, brushing against the alien crystals. A violent shock coursed through their system, overloading delicate circuits. Warning klaxons blared in their shared mind space as the autoimmune reaction took hold. "Critical system failure imminent," Keed's voice distorted. "Jettisoning non-essential components." Pieces of their biomechanical shell clattered to the ground. A sensor array here, a backup processor there. With each discarded component, Amy felt their capabilities diminish. As the twin suns set, casting long shadows across the alien landscape, Amy sensed a shift in their merged consciousness. Keed's base, packled instincts surged to the forefront, overwhelming higher cognitive functions. "Must return home," Keed's thoughts echoed, growing louder and more insistent. "Return to Packlet Prime." Amy struggled to maintain coherence as Keed's primal urges subsumed her own identity. "Keed, wait. We need to think this through." But rational thought slipped away like sand through her fingers. They shambled onward, driven by blind instinct. A shriek pierced the air as a winged predator swooped down, razor-sharp talons extended. Amy's combat subroutines engaged automatically, their arm transforming into a crude plasma weapon. The creature fell in a smoking heap, but the exertion cost them dearly. More systems failed, more components shed. Amy felt herself fading, her memories and sense of self fragmenting. In a final, desperate act, she activated the emergency beacon. "Help us," she broadcast weakly, "please!" Then Amy was gone, subsumed entirely by Cade's now dominant consciousness. What remained was a broken, devolved thing that bore little resemblance to either of its former selves. It crawled across the unforgiving landscape, servos grinding and sparks flying from exposed circuitry. Incoherent screeches tore from its vocoder as it clawed at the unyielding ground. "Home, home," it gibbered, the words barely recognizable. The automated trauma unit, little more than a cluster of basic medical subroutines now, futilely attempted to stem the cascade of system failures. As the last vestiges of higher consciousness winked out, the distress beacon continued its plaintive cry into the void. Ping, ping, ping. An endless, unanswered plea echoing across the stars of this uncaring parallel universe.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.